Welcome back to the Hard Truths Podcast. I am your host, Denver Biddle III. My co-host, Steve Traub. What's going on?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. Getting over this little illness, whatever.
There you go.
Still don't know how to categorize it, but it's a sickness. So
I'm with you. At least it's Friday.
yeah, exactly. And it's prior to the holidays, so I can get all that out of my system before it's time to party for Christmas and New Year's. So,
For sure.
this is episode 37. Episode 7 of the mini series that we're doing. It's basically fix and flip investing 101, where we take you from not knowing pretty much anything about fix and flip investing, and we basically turn you into an expert so that by the end of this, you're going to be able to tackle your own first deal. So with that being said, today we're going to talk about managing your rehab project. And Steve told me a little bit before hitting record that some of this is going to be a little bit of a repeat, a little bit of a refresher, but in a series that builds on top of each other. It's important to, refresh and just kind of really like beat those lessons more or less into your minds, especially assuming that a lot of this is your first exposure. You're going to need to, repetition is going to help build that knowledge base. So with that being said, let's just dive right into it.
I would love to. So again, we're just going to explore a little bit more about managing your project, some tips and tricks, we'll call it, to be successful with your project once obviously your loan is closed at this point. You're ready to get going with contractors and ready to start making some changes to the house. So we're going to talk a little bit about why effectively, managing your rehab project is important for you, frankly. As we all know, we're in this to make money. We're in this to profit on our hard work. So managing your project is certainly part of that profit. A few key things to keep in mind, is increased holding costs come with more time. So whether that is increased utility costs, property taxes, homeowners insurance, monthly payments to the lender, you name it, those costs go up, frankly, the longer that you're in the project. So effectively,
in other words, time equals money.
Time is money, right? It's the only commodity we can't get more of. So it's important to use it as wisely as you can. And, one other thing that we have to worry about here in Wisconsin, not everybody does, is we'll call it the weather factor.
Yeah.
Right. We were here yesterday or Wednesday, whatever it was. It's just snowing outside. And it's like, are people going to go and rehab a house in 4-degree weather? I don't know.
I was going to say, you might get into this, but I know Justin was talking about being able to sell a house in the wintertime, right?
Yeah, for sure. Strategically, like spring and summer seasons are usually pretty good for, people buying properties. Not everybody wants to pick up and move in the winter. And frankly, some people that are in leases aren't able to move out in the winter just because the landlord doesn't want that property to be vacant.
Right.
So you're in an interesting time, between the holidays anyways. People are busy. You just talked about not getting family sick while you're visiting them. Are you going to be buying a house when you're out, visiting family in various locations? Probably not.
Right.
But yeah, it is important. And it definitely comes into it as, he understood getting it unloaded before hopefully the middle of December, or he's going to be unloading it here in January. So just, again, something he had planned for and something that'll, ultimately cost him a little more money, but he'll be successful nonetheless. So, and the reason why, being thoughtful when it comes to breaking down and managing your rehab is important. Just we're stats based here for the most part, but in 2023, 60% of fix and flip projects went over budget due to one of two things: unforeseen delays. So, delay on cabinets, let's say, or contractor gets delayed for whatever reason. The other, issue that they ran into is just frankly poor planning, and that is, I'm new at this. Am I doing things the right way? And maybe they didn't think about some of the holding costs or some of the, call it non-traditional delays they may incur. Like, again, snow, maybe a contractor can't make it out there, whatever it is. So something to keep in mind. Rehab management is part of you building wealth over the course of doing these loans. Of course, your experience is going to be higher, right? You may also get a good reputation as a good real estate investor in the area. Maybe a contractor really wants to work with you at that point. They understand you follow through on timelines, you pay them timely. maybe your costs for rehab go down over the course of time. So it's important to put your best foot forward, not only with us as a lender, but with your partners you're going to utilize throughout the transaction. And then just a few kind of questions or takeaway questions from this, just in particular, is, are you prepared to track your costs and timelines during your rehab? If you are, how are you going to do that? Some people use a Google Doc, for example. Mm-hmm. Other people, like my wife is a project manager, her timeline probably looks a little bit different than a Google Doc. But whatever works well for your brain, just track your stuff. Know your numbers, know who's going into your property, know when your work's going to be done, and understand when you're going to be able to hit the market, frankly, and sell it or do a refinance, whatever your goals are. And then have you considered unexpected delays? Again, whether, contractor being sick, emergency at the property that, you have to deal with a water leak, let's say, put your contractors back a week for drywall. Are you prepared for that? And do you have kind of a contingency timeline? And then when you're effectively managing it, part of that is a realistic budget, right? Do you know what goes into your rehab? Are you including the property purchase price, the loan fees, the closing costs in figuring out what your rehab budget can be, and you can still be successful? Are you thinking about the permits that need to be pulled? Are you thinking about the timeline for those permits to be approved? City of Milwaukee may be quicker than the city of Detroit, for example. As we may or may not know. Right. So it's just kind of, understanding what goes into that rehab budget. And again, making sure that you're preparing for the purchase costs, the renovation costs, i.e. permits, timelines, contingency funds that we had talked about. And then what are your holding costs? Again, payments to the lender, property taxes, insurance, and then utilities for that property. And then finally, what are your selling costs? Are you going to list it yourself, or are you going to list it with an agent? Do you need to stage the property? When we went and looked at Justin's house, it looked like it had been staged. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that had cost him. Let's just say $1,000, but hopefully he built it into his budget. And knowing him, he probably did. Mm-hmm. And then other closing costs, paying for what you're responsible for taxes for the year while you've owned the property, even renovating it, title charges, transfer tax, depending on the state, is paid by the buyer or the seller. Just understanding, again, what goes into your budget and thinking about things that you may have not thought about, the selling costs, frankly.
Right.
I think we had talked about 7 or 8%, probably a pretty good number. Yeah. If you want to use 10 and be conservative, by all means. So, and then just talking about kind of some tips for accurate budgeting. Tracking your expenses. We talked about using Microsoft or a Google Doc sheet, Microsoft Excel, kind of however your brain works is fine. Just understand, hey, this cost me this. Maybe it was $1,500 over. Where can I cut $1,500 if I don't have that contingency plan? And then also getting quotes from those contractors. It's fantastic to say a floor is going to cost you $5,000. What if it costs you $7,000, or $10,000? Are you guessing, or do you know with certainty it's going to cost you $5,000? It's really important to get those bids and try to get quotes from people that you know and trust, or again, ask for referrals. And then, just kind of talking about, again, stats. Denver, what do you think the average holding costs in a percentage of? So this X percent of total fix and flip expenses is holding costs for the loan itself. What do you think that number is?
Holding costs?
Yeah.
Is a complete 10%.
Not bad, man. 20 to 25%.
Okay.
So, but keeping in mind those holding costs are expensive the longer the project goes on. So if you're doing a project in 6 weeks, 10% is great. If you're doing it in 6 months, and maybe closer to that 20.
Gotcha.
So a couple of key questions again, do you have a detailed line item budget? And we're going to talk about here in the next section why that is important, as we talked about yesterday. Mm-hmm. And then what steps are you taking to prevent cost overruns? Managing your project effectively and efficiently is going to hopefully reduce those costs over the course of time. So when you're building your timeline and your budget for a rehab, we will ask you for something called a scope of work. We had talked about a scope of work a little bit, but I'm going to get into this a little bit further. But scope of work is going to break down your project into phases. So you're going to have a demolition phase, possibly. You're going to have a repair phase. You're going to have a finishing phase, and you're going to have inspections from the city for those permits you pulled to make sure that your work is done correctly. So when you are filling out your scope of work, it is important to break down the projects. And we're just going to use a roof, for example. This is the example we had kind of working on live, right? So somebody had put in, a roof and gutters into their scope of work, but they had just put it as new roof. So it's like, okay, but you had $10,000 for a new roof. There's no demolition costs. And then there's no gutter costs in that. So what if the roof was 7 and the gutters are 3? So when they had sent us the work for the gutters, it wasn't approved because it wasn't in the scope of work. It's like, is this part of the roof? Is this a separate line item? If they would have, kind of broken it down a little bit further, they could have been reimbursed, frankly, a hell of a lot quicker. Save yourself a draw fee, save yourself time. We just talked about that, but time is the most important thing. So breaking down your scope of work. So I know if you're doing flooring, I know if you're doing cabinets, I know if you're doing countertops. A kitchen renovation for $25K is different than a kitchen renovation, 5 for appliances, 10 for cabinets, 10 for countertops. Those are 2 separate things and a lot easier for us to approve your scope of work when it's broken down into specific phases.
Right.
And then we'll break that down even further. So you're in the kitchen, right? What if it needs new plumbing? There's rough and there's finished plumbing. So the rough plumbing is done, right? What does the finish look like? How does that timeline affect it? Does anything have to dry? Do the drywallers have to come in ahead of finished plumbing? Again, all very important questions to ask yourself when you're figuring out what your timeline is. And then start and end dates for each phase. Let's say your project has those 4 phases we talked about: demolition, repairs, finishing, and inspections. Give yourself a timeline for those. Demo, 2 weeks. Repairs, 4 weeks. Finishing, 4 weeks. Inspections, let's say it's over Christmas, 4 weeks. You know what I mean? Break your plan down. Make sure you have a time frame and you're giving yourself a little bit of a contingency. And then coordinate with your contractors for their availability. Nothing worse than being ready for a contractor to show up and he or she does not, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
We hear that all the time. My contractor didn't show up. It's like, well, did you tell them that you're going to be ready for them in 2 weeks? Or did you call them the morning of to say, hey, I'm ready to start my plumbing?
Right.
Maybe it's on them. Maybe you should look in the mirror and just reflect a little bit on your timelines. We don't want to be too blunt with people, but not every delay is on your contractors. We'll just say that as nicely as we can. But again, coordinating, preparing, being successful. And then, just tools we had talked about: Google Sheets, Asana, Trello. Those are all just different tools. They have different price ranges, different costs to you, but they'll help you break down your project a little bit further. So personally, I'm a simple person, I would say, in some regards. I'm a Google Sheets guy. I can see what I'm looking at, right? Our scope of works are done on Google Sheets. We find it to be pretty easy to share those docs as well. So that's kind of, our side of it. But, in that Google Sheet, when I'm breaking down my timeline, I'm going to set in there weekly or biweekly check-ins with my contractor. Hey, Denver, you got my flooring, dude. How are we doing? You'll hopefully respond to me. Am I communicating with you every week? Denver doesn't lay flooring yet, but we'll get there at some point.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, we'll get our first flip moving here. So, and the reason that timeline is important is the average rehab project is 4 to 6 months. So if you have a 6-month loan term and it is 4 months, you have 60 days to get your property on the market and get it sold. So, figuring out staging, photos, realtors, all of that stuff is going to go into your timeline. So a couple of questions or takeaways from setting up your rehab timeline. How are you going to ensure your contractors are on track, right? Are you doing weekly calls? Am I going to running to your property because you're an out-of-state investor? Am I using a general contractor who's going to then sub out these works, these items to different contractors himself? Who is ensuring that timeline is on track? And then have you built in extra time to your timeline? We just said the average rehab project is 4 to 6 months. So can you build in an extra 2 weeks for if you're at 4.5 months, we need you to be paid off in 6 months. You start getting a little bit closer on that timeline. So make sure that you are prepared. And then, the inspections obviously is a piece of it, but the material delays. We've all heard horror stories from new builds, where the cabinets took 12 weeks or doors took 6 months. It was some crazy stuff that builders and people that were contractors had to deal with. Yeah. Did they have those contingencies built into their timelines? I don't know that anyone had COVID contingencies built in, but right. Something that we can use that as an example and kind of learn from that overall. And then Denver, let's talk a little bit about kind of hiring and managing, your contractors. If you were searching for a contractor for, your first flip, when you're vetting that contractor, like what are some things that you're going to ask for or look at to decide if it's the, right fit for you?
It's a really good question. I don't know what to ask them, but I for sure would be looking for reviews, right? Like whether it's, I don't know, Google, I don't know where you find these people, Angie's List, or, the talking to the actual person that referred them maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know, specific questions.
Yeah.
Because they could lie.
For sure. I think some things that we would look at is like licenses, making sure, because not every state's going to require a GC to have a license, but if you're a plumber and you don't have a plumbing license, that might be a problem, because these people are going to be the ones pulling permits for you. So it's important to check their licenses, ask for references or referrals. Maybe you got referred, over to Johnny, the contractor. Like ask me, how did Johnny do on your house? When Allison and I were looking at doing some renovations, we asked our neighbor, hey, you just had renovations done. How was the company that you had used? Do you mind sending us a referral? We've like physically walked through their house and we're like, looks great.
Yeah.
So asking for those kind of past projects too. If I, shout out Paul and Marcia, but if they weren't our great neighbors, we wouldn't know about it. But it was something that it's like, hey, can I see your last project? Maybe I did a flip for you. The property went on MLS. Like I can look at those photos and figure out what's good or bad about it. And then also, considering hiring specialists. So if you're going to GC your own project, be your own general contractor, you're going to look for plumbers that are licensed, right? You're going to look for electricians that are licensed. You're going to ask them again, for references, for referrals. You don't always want to count on a GC to do the electrical work. What if he or she has no idea what they're doing? Hopefully you've done your due diligence,
right?
But figuring out if you're going to sub my work out, who are you going to sub it out to? I'd like to know that. That's important to me. Some GCs will have their own team. Some find John or Susie off the street. That level of work is likely going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So, and then, managing your contractors effectively, how we help you with this, which please pay attention to this part. You fill out your scope of work based on detailed work, right? I am not going to give your contractor $100,000 to get started. Doesn't happen. Reason being is that contractor take that $100K. Hey, Denver, I ordered materials, changed my phone number, dropped off the face of the earth. I now own an island in the Bahamas.
Right. For $100,000? Woof.
I mean, you could, islands.com, check it out. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, we are going to have you set up a scope of work telling me how you want your draws to be built. So when you're talking to your contractor, hey, if I pay you every other Monday, does that work for you? For whatever work you've completed in the last 2 weeks, how long do you think this kitchen rough is going to take? All of those are going to factor into your scope of work. If he or she is expecting a check for $50,000 up front, 50 grand when work is completed, that's a red flag for me. Yeah. I would ask them, why is that so important? I can help you get materials and we'll get you started with some cash up front. No problem there. I just can't give you all of it. There's no reason you should need all of it. So managing them effectively and communicating and making sure that they know when they're going to get paid, how our process works, that is your responsibility as the person taking out the loan. We are absolutely here to help you. We are here to answer questions, but this is your responsibility. So take it seriously. 68% of all fix and flip investors reported contractor delays as their biggest challenge for getting their project completed. So 7 out of 10. Do we feel like those 7 out of 10, had a plan? Did they vet the contractor? Have they done their due diligence? Say 30% have, 30% haven't, so how can we help you bring that number down? I want you to be the 32%, not the 68% that reported contractor delays. And then what are you going to ask those contractors besides references, licenses, past projects? Hey, contractor, give me a timeline and a cost breakdown of the project you're going to do for me. When do you need to get paid? How much does the kitchen cost? How much are the cabinets? How much is the countertop? Allow me to set up my scope of work to work for both of us. And then how do you handle unexpected issues or change orders? Hey, bad news, this just doesn't fit for whatever reason. What can I do to get new cabinets or new countertop? Or do you have someone that might be able to hook us up with something so I don't have to wait for 12 weeks for a new custom order?
Yeah.
Those are all really important questions. When you are tracking your progress, How can you do that? And how, most importantly, can you stay organized? Organization is key to being successful in any project, let alone when you are managing a house, a flip, other people that you have limited control over the decisions that they make. So, make sure your expenses are staying in your budget and make sure you're tracking those overruns. We had talked about a deal a few weeks ago that we did in Chicago. He's like, hey, I'm rebuilding porches. It's twice what I thought it was. I'm going to have to adjust my scope of work accordingly. It's like, no problem. But did you prepare with, a contingency budget? Do you have the budget elsewhere that we can then shuffle over to allow you to fix the porches outside? Again, winter in Chicago, porches, HVAC, two of the most important things, right? You can't work there really without heat for the most part.
Exactly.
So you're monitoring your costs, you're monitoring your timelines, you're monitoring the quality, making sure that work that is being completed is good quality work. We had a call in a few weeks ago from a guy in Detroit. He put $70,000 into his property, paid a contractor $70,000. He found out 6 weeks after the work was done, when he was the one who pulled permits, none of the work was completed correctly, I should say. So he's out $70,000. He came to us for a renovation. He's literally tearing down new walls, tearing out what he thinks is new plumbing, fixing a roof, things that he paid out of pocket for. Sheesh. A very, very bad lesson to learn.
Yeah.
You never want to see anybody be unsuccessful, but in that case, it's, did you monitor the quality of work? Did you ask for references? If the answer to those questions is yes, people can still not be honest with you. That happens, right? But do your due diligence to try to prevent that as much as you can.
I would have went on a rampage.
Yeah, you'd like to think that's the case, right? You got to find that contractor before you can, but very
got found.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows? Hopefully, but an investor using and tracking their details of their project is going to be so much more successful than the investor that is just flying by the seat of their pants. There are certain things you don't need to really prepare for. We come into work, we grab whatever's in our closet. Hey, it's clean. Let's roll, right? When you're preparing for something a little more serious, wedding, first date, whatever it is, you might think about it a little bit more. Hey, what am I going to think about what I'm going to wear? AKA, am I going to think about this thing that is more important than this other thing? Don't plan for what you want. That's fine. Make sure you plan for this. It is extremely important. Reason I'm bringing that up is that is the number one common pitfall for investors. We had talked about it earlier. Contractors need to do their job. You need to be prepared, but your lack of planning is going to make you not successful. Make it lucky once or twice, but I promise you eventually your luck will run out on it. Underestimating contingencies is another common pitfall. We talked about it, 10 to 15%. 50 if you want.
I'm telling you.
If it works at 50, dude, you found yourself a sweetheart deal. I will say that.
Listen.
But I do like the fact that you're being conservative about it. I'll say that. So
I'm not really holding on to that 50. It's just funny to,
dude. I mean, hey, you gotta rein it in a little bit. But what if you went to 20? That's cool.
I like that.
We'll work with you.
Yeah.
We have somebody right now she just did 20% on hers.
See,
no issue.
Yeah.
And then another common pitfall is just miscommunication with the contractors. Setting your expectations, setting your timelines, making sure their schedule works with your schedule, and you can document everything you have in writing. Get a contract, sign the contract, make sure it is in writing. It's not, this is like $30,000. Well, you said it was like 30, but it's actually 60. What do we do now? Get it in writing. We're going to talk about just a few examples of people who are successful and unsuccessful. And the reason being, the first investor, detailed timeline and budget, communicated weekly with his contractors, finished the project 10% under budget. Great. What did he do well? He had a detailed timeline, a detailed budget, communicated weekly, was able to come in under where those repairs were estimated. Maybe that, again, is because he's checking in on the contractor's work, saying, hey, maybe we can use this extra material in this room. We can save ourselves $1,000.
So that's 10% extra profit, right? That's like if I list my car because I'm about to try to list my car for $3,500.
Yeah.
And somebody, I don't know, a little bidding war happens. And I originally bought it for like $3,000, let's say. And then somebody wants to buy it for 37. So then that's kind of similar to this situation, right?
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Exactly. And I do like that example. So let me know if you need a car.
Well, I will at some point.
All right. Might sell you mine. We'll see. We'll take that up. That'll be episode 8.
All right.
How to negotiate with your coworker.
Right.
All right. And then the person that wasn't successful, they hired an inexperienced contractor without vetting them. We had talked about, that guy who spent $70,000. He missed his deadlines. He didn't have things fixed that he thought were fixed. His profit is gone. He's losing money when he sells that house, but it is a hell of a lot better than the situation that he is in right now. So
how does that, do we have the time to go through that lightly?
Yeah, sure.
So sounds like a nightmare. So like 70, he spent 70.
He spent 70 on repairs. He paid $14,000 for the house. He spent $84K.
So he's 84 in.
Yep.
And he's got to do all the repairs are wrong.
Everything.
So he's got to
rip everything out. Electric, plumbing, walls, roof.
And how much was he gonna make?
That house, I think the ARV on that, I'll have to refresh my memory. I want to say it was 140 or 145. So let's just call it 95. Say he's into it for 95 with costs and loan costs, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's set to make 50K. He's now coming to us doing another 60 to 70 grand in work. His profit is gone. But he has an asset he's sitting on right now. His holding costs are expensive. He has a house that he can't rent out. He can't sell. And unfortunately, he got taken advantage of by a bad contractor. Let's get into that a little bit further though, Denver, because I think you bring up a really good example. Like, how did he even get to the point of spending $70,000 and not realizing what was going into it?
The whole time.
He gave his contractor full control of everything. He was the one pulling permits. Initially, he said, pulled permits together. Here's what I need you to go and do, blah, 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 to the buyer, saying, hey, the electrical's fixed. Now the drywall's up. Client can't go there and check in on it, right? So what happens when all of that work is done? It's like, hey, you have 6 open permits, electrical, plumbing, so on and so forth, that we now know should have been closed when the rough plumbing was done. Guy comes out from the city. Guess what, Denver? Rip a hole in your wall. I need to see what the plumbing looks like. Okay, well, this plumbing is wrong. This plumbing is wrong. This electrical is wrong. And he starts to make you open up walls that you wouldn't normally have to do, A. B, you're recognizing that all the work that you think was completed isn't completed. So he doesn't find out until the contractor is done, he has been paid, and the city comes back out to give him the final approval for his permits. He didn't.
Was he out of state or like a newer investor?
No, new investor.
Newer, okay.
Yep. Brand new investor in Detroit, brand new. And didn't work with a hard money lender. And I'm not here to say he needs to work with the hard money co. I'm just going to use this as an example. Yeah. If he does his scope of work, right, and we require photos, hey, show me your rough plumbing is done. You want 10 grand? No problem. Take a photo. He didn't have someone in his corner helping him fill out a scope of work. He maybe didn't listen to this podcast and understand that, you should be budgeting for your timeline, your costs, and making sure someone is checking in as me as your contractor. It's great for you to believe in me and think I'm a great person. And I hope that you feel that way, but find out, go and make sure I'm doing what I said I'm going to do. So, it sucks to hear that he got taken advantage of. It happens every single day. But if he was working with a hard money lender, I think especially just us, we would have gotten, say, $10,000 down the road, not $70,000, and recognize, hey, this photo doesn't show shit. Like, nothing has been done. Why are we covering up rough and finished plumbing before a permit is closed? We have an idea of what your project should look like. We know that you need your permits closed. If you don't know that because you're a new investor, you just trust somebody to say they're going to do what they're going to do.
And instead of, maybe it just would have been 20 grand out of his profits, but he still would have made
25,
something.
Yeah. And I mean, call it 100% ROI if he does a hard money loan, because he's probably come to the table with 25K.
Right.
Think about that, $80,000 to $90,000 of a loan, 20% down, closing costs, title charges, so on and so forth. He's still making 100% ROI, and we're preventing him from being completely taken advantage of for $70,000. So it is important. Let's talk about one win while we're here, just because this is something I just want to shout us out for. We see it all the time. We talk about doing takeover loans for other lenders. We had a client that applied with us a couple of weeks ago. Ended up having a private money lender that came through. So, let's call him a family friend that was going to fund her the money, likely for, say, 50% of her profits, kind of like a gap funder, we'll call him. Yeah. So he was going to come in. He had a personal emergency come up and wasn't able to fund her project. She was supposed to close on Tuesday. So her and I are emailing back and forth, kind of going through it, just doing the typical follow-up. We find out the other lender fell through. Obviously, I call her. We have a conversation. We get her application moving. That was Tuesday. The last document from her application she had sent over was Tuesday night at, call it 8:30 p.m. Shout out Jacob, our processor, but that file is closing today. So clear to close in 48 hours, which is insanity.
That is crazy.
Brand new state for us. We're lending in Washington. Seasoned investor, well prepared, great scope of work, had all of her information lined up for us. I said, I need these 10 things. She had them to me at 8:30 the same night. So she was prepared. Certainly not the way that she probably intended to get to the closing table, clearly.
Yeah.
But just keep that in mind. If something falls through and you are still serious about taking your project down and getting started, please reach out to us. 48 hours is a hell of a timeline, right? Like, that is insane. Yeah. And some people post that they can do it. I'm not a believer that they can, but we'll give them the credit. We actually are living here. We're actually doing this. So if you have a deal that is going sideways for whatever reason, you have an unexpected delay, please reach out to us. We are happy to look at it. Some of them we can save, some of them we can't, but it's important to at least take a shot at it.
Yeah, and just to kind of reiterate, I know we're not here, doing shameless plugs the entire time during our episodes. Yeah, not yet, but like, we're going to talk about us a little bit.
Yeah.
And I feel like in situations like this where we are providing value, like I think it's acceptable to do so.
Yeah.
Like, number one, we kind of, are a little generous when it comes to our estimate of how soon we can close a loan. It's usually, we say like 7 business days or 7 days, something like that. So like, obviously this 7 days or less, and this is clearly an example of doing so, or less. You know what I mean? Yeah, like 2 days. That's crazy. Number one, so like it is possible. We're not just feeding you guys, just nonsense and trying to pump ourselves up. That can actually happen. Number one. And then number two, and kind of harkening back to the example prior to the one that we just talked about, I think it just speaks to the value of, quite frankly, working with us. In that situation where guys basically underwater and he's at risk of losing a lot of money. But in communicating, number one, to us in our unique setup where like everything is done in-house, we're able to move a lot faster, and we're able to, with our head honcho being so involved in the process, we're able to take unique situations, and some situations just might make more sense for us, or we're able to make them work in ways that other places aren't able to.
For sure.
Number one. And then number two, just speaking to the human aspect, like just talk to us. Like, I know a lot of times, or I've heard at least, I don't know, people in collections and just like on the bill side, the payment side, when it comes, whether it's like credit cards or whatever kind of bills you're talking about. And I even see it in the email, the emails, or like whenever I listen to like cold calls, like on TikTok and stuff. That's a fun side of TikTok, by the way, if you want some entertainment. But they always talk about reaching out to them or answering the phone or being the first person to initiate contact rather than the other way around, because they're a company. You do owe money, and at the end of the day, they're trying to get their money back, but they're also the good companies anyway. And I feel like most companies are leaning towards that way of like, they're also human beings on the other side. Like they understand how it is. Yeah. And I've even heard like Gerardo and Scott and other people talk about this, is that like, if we don't hear from you, like we don't know, we assume the worst, you know what I mean?
100%.
So, but having that contact and knowing that we're, very personable and we control everything. We don't have, I was just editing a video of Scott talking about this. We don't have this board of directors that we have to adhere to and all this, like everything's done here in-house. There's that openness and that flexibility to have multiple solutions if you need that. So I don't know, just something kind of cool. I thought that should be shared.
Yeah, no. Again, we're here to help. We want to be a lending partner. I think everyone's making money, right? Like we're running a business, just like you're running a flipping business. So of course we make money on loans when they close, for sure. No doubt about that. But our goal is to be able to offer you solutions that may or may not be available somewhere else. We just talked about that deal in Washington, but she had called other online lenders and they were like, no thanks, no chance. And that's what she said. She was pessimistic. She's like, I don't even think it's possible. I was like, well, if it wasn't possible, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it's like, Is that a crazy ass timeline? Absolutely. Is Jacob going to stay here till 8 p.m.? Even though I didn't ask him to, shout out Jacob. Yeah. But is he going to stay here till 8 p.m. to get stuff uploaded? Like, he doesn't have to do that, but we want to be a partner. We want you to be successful. So if you can find someone else that you feel that way about, that they feel that way about you, that's a good lender for you. But it's important to call around and understand, again, not everyone is created equal. So if somebody else says no, it isn't always a hard no. It's we're just not the right fit for you in this particular situation. That's what they're saying to you. So reach out to us, ask us if we can solve your problems. We would love to take a shot at it.
And I also overheard in many conversations that the majority of our investors on this side of the business are repeat investors. So that says something about us valuing the relationship.
Absolutely. It's over 40% of our loans are repeat investors.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So it just, speaks to us as far as like us really trying to develop those relationships and really, again, trying to be a true partner, and not someone who just says, hey, these are the black and white rules. Yes, we have rules. Yes, there are regulations. But there's always a strategic or creative way to try to like present it to make it work. So give us a shot. All right. And we had, talked about the real life examples, just a couple of, kind of key takeaways or kind of recapping some points here for you is managing your rehab requires a few things: planning, budgeting, and communication. You had just talked about communicate with us as your lender, please. But no, communication is the number one reason that relationships across the board fail.
Say that again.
Communication is the number one reason that relationships, as a general statement, fail. It's when the communication is lapsing that there is no relationship. It is a two-way street, for you and whatever that other party is, whatever the form of that relationship is. So make sure your communication is good. Make sure you're staying organized and making sure that you're proactive, meeting with your contractors, making sure your project is on track. Always build in a contingency timeline, contingency budget, but make sure you're still within that budget. Shit happens, be prepared for it. All right, you want to talk about what we're going to talk about in the next episode, Denver, or you want me to take this one?
What are we going to talk about? I don't know. What are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about the fun stuff, which is marketing and selling your flip. So
I love that.
Yeah, we've gone through all of the steps to get to the point that you're ready to list your property and frankly get that thing sold. So next episode, we're going to dive into a little bit about what to look for when you're getting ready to market, maybe some things to think about, and then people to reach out to make sure you're on a good track for timeline and what your budget is.
That sounds very exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sign us off here, my friend?
Yeah, well, this was another, I feel, very nugget-filled episode of The Hard Truths. We'll see you guys next time. I'm Denver Biddle. He's Steve Traub. Enjoy your weekend.
Have a great weekend.
Peace.